You're listening to the Lowdown podcast, brought to you by Sigma Kappa National Headquarters staff. We'll focus on topics like health, wellness, the fraternity and sorority community, higher education, and life skills that women need in all stages of their lives. We'll also feature stories from inspiring and empowering Sigma Kappas. Check out the Sigma Kappa website for regular updates and new episodes.
Well, hi, and welcome back to the Lowdown podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Negri, and I'm here with Addison Cosley and Jessica Smith, author of Your Twenties. Little bit about me. Live in Indianapolis, and I am not a member of Sigma Kappa, but I am joined by two other members of Sigma Kappa today. Addison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Addison Cosley. I'm a part of the Kappa Beta chapter that's located at Grand Valley State University. So that's in Allendale, Michigan. And right now I currently live in Grand Rapids.
Awesome. And then we're here with a special guest today, Jessica Smith, author of Your Twenties. Jessica, how are you today?
I'm great. It's still so cool, like pinch me to hear like your author. It's like it's been 6 years since the book's been out, but still a dream come true. But happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I live in San Jose right now. I'm from Delta Iota chapter in Chico State and held an officer position all 4 years. Got to live in the house for 2 of my years at Chico, which was a blast, my sophomore year and then senior year when I was president, which lots of great fun memories. And quick shout out to Chico State. I just heard word in our Facebook alumni group that they won Greek Week this year. So that's a huge one for us. We're very big on that. So I'm very proud.
Way to represent. That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, so Your Twenties, it's a book about like growing up and going through things. Is that right? Like, how would you describe it?
So Your Twenties is a lighthearted, slightly sarcastic way of talking about all the ups and downs of your 20s. And the book really came about so the seed of the idea was planted at a late night kind of party at Chico State. And I was sitting there with a bunch of my friends and I just kind of said to them, gosh, there's no manual for this kind of growing up thing that we're all doing. And then it got me curious and looking out and seeing, okay, what other books for 20 somethings are out there? And there were a few, but the thing was they were all written by folks who were 30, 40 years older, which is great. However, when I talked to my friends, it wasn't what we were looking for. And it doesn't resonate always reading something by someone kind of looking back into their past. And so I thought it would be neat to write from the perspective of being a 20 something. And, the book was published when I was 29. So it was this really unique way of being able to talk to 20 somethings while still being a 20 something. So it's a guidebook about things that I've learned and navigated, but a large part of it is here, you try this on, do this activity and have some self-discovery around this topic for yourself.
Oh, that's awesome.
Awesome. That's awesome to hear what inspired that because I'm 21 right now. So I definitely relate to some of those things you've said. But I know in your book, there's 5 major areas of focus. And right now we're focusing on relationships. But could you kind of tell us how you narrowed down those 5 areas and why you chose to focus on them?
Yeah. So I started out with 12 different areas, and they were more granular. They're more zoomed in. And the first for me in terms of writing a book is getting that outline down. And so at first, the outline was just kind of major topics spanning over 12 different areas. And then when I looked at it a little bit closer, I thought, oh, these can be grouped into overall kind of overarching, a little bit more broad topics. And what I liked about these 5 was each of these areas are the ones that I consider we go through the most change and transition in our 20s. It's the areas of life that society is asking you what's next. It's where you're being called to define for yourself. There's a lot of unknown with these 5 areas. So landing on self-love, body acceptance, healthy mind, career, and relationships really allowed me to speak about the overarching, most impactful transitions that we go through. And even if we just take a moment to think, oh my gosh, there's five major areas of our life that are shifting and changing and evolving in just 10 years, which isn't that long. It feels, it's time is so interesting, especially once you leave school, because in school you've got, you've got a summer, you've got a fall, you've got semesters or quarters, they're kind of time bound. And then you're just kind of launched into the quote real world. And then you're having to define those markers for you. So these five helped me really focus in on, okay, what are 20 somethings experiencing, going through, having to figure out. And so these were the five I landed on.
I love that. I love that. I love how you describe it because I'm 29 now. So that's kind of when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah, it's so weird to look back at the last 9 years and be like, oh, that was only 9 years. But when, like, Addison, you say you're 21, I was like, oh, that was a very different day. That was a very different time. And I think that, like, it is like such a shifting timeline in a lot of young people's lives. So that's awesome. And also being in your 20s can be very hard. I think it's like you said, a time of growth, a time of change. We're talking a lot about relationships today. So what is your advice for navigating changes and transitions in relationships over time?
Yeah. So in my book, there's 3 chapters per section. And in the relationship chapter, I'll probably touch on a few pieces of what I share in the book. But relationships in terms of friendship, platonic relationships have always been very important to me. I've had many best friends over the years, many of which have come and gone. There's also some that have stayed through the years. I think what's interesting about friendships is oftentimes we call them our chosen family, right? They're the people that we enjoy being around. We talk to them about everything. We confide in them, making memories or trying new things. We even travel, like the list goes on and on. And I think friendship can be a really fertile ground for growth and well-being. And that alone, I think, impacts how we move through the world. If we're in a place of feeling supportive, we're going to be more alive, we're going to be more able to have courageous stepping forward into our true selves. And so yeah, friendships I think are ones that they're important, and it's okay that they ebb and flow. But I see them as an opportunity to try on new versions of ourselves.
I love that. One of the reasons I joined Sigma Kappa is just for that aspect of friendship. And I think it definitely made me a whole new person joining Sigma Kappa. So, would you be able to talk a little bit about how you think friendships play a role in shaping our sense of self?
Yes, I love that. And I also joined to for that friendship factor, as one of 4 girls growing up, I think siblings are a huge piece of growth, and it doesn't have to be direct siblings like cousins and things like that, but then, I've always been surrounded by girls, so a sorority, a
Me
sorority was
too.
just kind of that next stage for me. But in terms of our sense of self, I see friendships as less dogmatic than family, if that makes sense. So sometimes family can come with more parameters and more particular ways of how you're expected to show up, or your role in the family, like being the oldest. There's a lot of, and I talk about this in the book. The chapter's titled 104, but there's certain expectations, or maybe your family expects you to go in a certain career, or all of your family are teachers. There's all these kind of unwritten rules or things that you may feel confined to in a family, whereas we can try things on more openly within friendships because we don't have as many of those in the box kind of feelings. And I love that feeling of opportunity and joy that a friendship can inspire with that. So using friendships as a way to, if you want to be a whole new person, going from middle school to high school or high school to college, like you can, right? Like the friends sometimes haven't seen all the phases of you, and that brings opportunity.
Yeah, it's like I have a friend that always describes it as like when she goes home, it's the I knew you when like quote, like I knew you when you were like a little kid and you poked holes in all the cups at a party or like things like that. And so that is so freeing. I think I find that so relatable. Like, yeah, with my friends, there's like, this is who I am. You've seen me as this. And then you don't have all of that history that they're just like piling on you and expectation. That's
Mhm.
awesome. Yeah, one of four. Are you the oldest, youngest, middle? Is that it
I'm
like,
the oldest, yes.
oh
Mhm.
man, I've heard
I
a
have a
lot
lot
about
of identity around that, I think,
like
like, just and every the sibling, the family dynamic, all of it I see as a playground for self-discovery, and, my sisters have by far given me, the toughest feedback, the hardest feedback, but also the most unconditional support. So it's I do look for that in my friendships too. Like, does this person tell me the tough truth? And they also like, is it unconditional? So I think I've learned a lot from my siblings in, for a fact they're going to be there. So you go to places that may be more scary or, challenge each other. Because, at the end of the day, I'm stuck with this person. So while you can look at it like I'm stuck with them, but it also, that security allows for, taking more risks in the relationship. So I try and look for that in friendships too.
that's awesome. I'm the baby, so I'm on the exact opposite spectrum. I'm the youngest of four. So
Love it. Love it.
awesome. So I wonder, like, as like relationships change and as you're like defining yourself, um, how do you handle, or how would you handle, I guess, a situation where you feel your own sense of self being compromised, like in a friendship, or I mean, even I guess in a family situation? I think that could be interesting. And what like strategies like help you maintain that, like a healthy balance between who you are and like who you are in a friendship?
Yeah, this is a big one, I think. And a lot of like, I was just chatting with my second sister, Kelsey, the other day about how her friendships are evolving, right? She's 32 and have been out of school for a little bit of time, and your friendships definitely go through different phases. And I've had a lot of relationships too, whether it be love or friendship, fizzle out over the years. And I've reflected on it a bit, and I think it comes down to perhaps our growth in the way that we were growing at the time is different, right? I was growing in one way, they're growing in a different way, or perhaps we weren't able to grow together, right? That happens as well. Um, and so part of it, I think, is it's important to recognize the ways in which we evolve, like individually, and be honest with who's aligned to that and who's not aligned with that. The fact of the matter is it's not going to be everyone, and it's not going to be everyone all the time. So being okay with a person coming into your life for maybe it's a work friend, and you work at this job and you're super tight with that person for 3 years, and then you move on to another opportunity and that fizzles out. I don't look at that as a failure. I look at it as just a natural cycle of someone coming into our lives when there's a connection or there's an alignment or, synergy. And then when there's different growth paths, that fizzles out. And then leaves room for someone new to come in. So giving ourselves flexibility in this and dropping this idea of if a person leaves our life, it's because something went wrong or it's something we did or they did. I think we need to drop that kind of mental outlook on it and think of it more like just nature, like just like the seasons, right? Friendship can come and they can go, and it doesn't mean they're gone forever. Spring comes again after winter, right? Comes every year. So it's something we can count on every single year. So thinking about what you need in each season for you, and being okay for the people in your life to also flow like that, I think is a big one for me.
Yeah.
I love that. So building off of that, friendships can be a source of both support and conflict. So how would someone be able to find a balance between being a supportive friend, but also giving their friends a space to grow independently and also still having that sense of self, like you were saying?
Yeah, I think one of the chapters called in the relationship section in Your 20s is beautiful boundaries. And it may, and part of that activity that I offer as an opportunity for people to try it on is starting with identifying what you need and want in a relationship, independent of who is in your life now. So I think a big kind of thing that in your 20s, you're so outwardly focused on external that sometimes it seems counterintuitive, right? Like some of the external factors are, well, what are you going to do for work? Who are you going to date? Where are you going to live? Like it's all these external things, but like the secret answer is like going within and getting super clear about what's true for you, who you are, what you want, what you need, and then looking out with that clarity. And it allows for less overwhelm because you know what's for you and what's not. So like some questions that you could ask yourself are, what are your values? I thought about this the other day, like, gosh, like every company I've worked for, I've just adopted their values. Like these are our culture values, right? And I'm like, do I have some for myself? And so having, it's something that maybe we've thought about here and there. It's like, yeah, of course I have values, but do we have them written down? Do we know if someone were to say, hey, Addison, like, what are your values? You could say, oh yeah, it's this, this, and this. Another question you could ask yourself is what you need in a friendship. So is it in this moment, in this season now, is it honesty? Is it fun? Is it humor? Is it security? Is it, camaraderie, whatever it might be? Another question, what activities make you feel good? Big one here, another question, what are your non-negotiables? So in relationship, what are things that you cannot do without? And then what are your nice to have? So those questions and knowing what you need and what you stand for and what's important to you is going to be unique to you, right? Like your truth is your truth. It's not something you need signed off on. It's not something your parents need to approve. It's you for you. And that can help balance between knowing what's supportive and where you can give space to another to grow independently. So, the more that you know about yourself in terms of those needs and wants, the more that you can stand on solid ground and know kind of self from other and give that person just as much leeway and runway to make decisions and all of that, when knowing, okay, this is where, there's some crossing the line here. This is where there's not alignment. And then you can always take action either way from there. But I think the goal of friendships aren't to have friends that fit in a nice little box. It's about finding a union that complements us. So I think it really comes down to like some inner reflection on just having clarity about your needs and wants and knowing who's going to support that. And if there's conflict, then you can have clarity on, okay, what do I do next here? I wanted to share too that if you do come in conflict with a friendship, or if there is that misalignment between you and another, a big piece that I've been continuing to learn is knowing when to say no. And I think you may be jaded hearing that, right? Because I know that sometimes I hear the same thing over and over on Instagram or on TikTok or these, it's like you hear it so many times and then you have to kind of step back and going, well, am I doing it? Am I practicing actually saying no? Or like knowing it isn't enough, practicing it and trying it on for yourself is really important. And like, if you do have a friendship that doesn't feel good anymore, knowing when to say no is going to be really important. At first, when I was practicing this, I would have so much anxiety around saying no because of all these external things. Like they're not going to like me. They're going to be pissed off. They're never going to invite me to something ever again. And then I would overly explain all the reasons why it was a no. When at the end of the day, no is no. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to, sell them on the idea as to why you can't. So, being able to, being able to know what's your yes and what's your no in relationship, I think is really key, because each time we say yes to something, something else is being said. We're saying no to something else. We only have so much time in the day. So I would offer that up as for potentially a practice or something to try on. And it takes courageous conversation, bravery to say no to sometimes. But the worst thing you can do is say yes to something and the next day feel kind of that energetic hangover, right? Because you said yes to something that you didn't have the space or time or energy for. So that could be something, a tool that folks can use in relationship.
I kind of want to ask you a little bit about the process. You said you were in college when you started like outlining the book, or like were just inspired to write the book. How was that going for you?
So in college, I was inspired, like I describe it as like the seed was planted. I'm like, interesting. There's no book out there for my friends and I. And then that's when I started to just kind of, I've always been a writer. So just kind of writing out different things I was going through, different experiences, and over time had a lot of different topics and things, in my Google Docs and things. And then so after college, I really started to put the plan in motion into researching. I self-published the book. So I didn't want to wait for any publisher to tell me what it was going to look like or what the title was and stuff. And so the book was really kind of zeroed in. I guess I was 26 when I really started honing in on writing it and put it all together. And so it took a few years to get it out and edited and all of that. But one of the cool pieces of it is during the pandemic, the book started getting very popular. And I think it's because 20 somethings started, or they had, moments of these coming of age moments that they no longer could do, right? Because everyone was stationed at home, like whether it be a dance or even dating or, walking the stage or all of these kind of key moments that you look forward to. And so it started really circulating a lot around 20 something podcasts. And I think the reason that folks like it is because one, it gives them a lot of opportunity to self-discover through each of the 5 sections. And there's this really neat part in the back that I went out. It's called Celebrating Your 20s. And it's to further the idea that there is no one way to grow up and it doesn't have to look a certain way. Even though we're fed, these are the check boxes to growing up. It's non-existent. You can grow up in any particular order and do whatever you want. And so this section, Celebrating Your 20s, I went out and interviewed people from all over the world of all ages reflecting on their 20s. And so it's really cool because you can read like in self-love, like, whoa, it looks like 50 different ways. And so, I'm no expert at growing up. Gosh, I think I'll never stop growing up, but the book it brings people together. And I think it allows for an opportunity to like have 2 friends, like get the book and talk openly about what the chapters entail, and helps to build a solid foundation of trust between 2 people, because in order to have trust, you got to be vulnerable. You got to share, what's behind the curtain a little bit. So yeah, it's literally been a dream come true. And so I'm on to my next book now.
Any sneak peek into what that might be, or is that like all hush hush?
It is such a different beast than the first one. The first one, what is fun and playful and humorous. I'd like to think the second book is too, but it's a little bit different of vibe, because it's about a really big breakup I went through that actually, oh, this is interesting. It came out the same year, or the breakup happened the same year that the book was published. So the book was published February 2018. I was blindsidedly dumped in May of that year. And so it's this book about when the rug gets pulled out from under you, the journey from there until, kind of getting back out there. So it's been interesting to write. It's got a soul of its own, but I'm having fun with it. It's very healing to write about this.
I mean, I'm like, it's not awesome that you went through that, but it's awesome that you can work through that in such a like creative, productive way. Cause I think that, I don't know, I find it like, I'm like, I don't know. I feel like ice cream and television might be most people's way to go, but writing a
And
book is a good move.
the majority, the first 6 chapters are all, there's a lot of coping mechanisms and different things. And that's what I think gives it such a different, vibe to the first book. Is like the first book, I felt like there was a little bit more time. Like I'm looking back at the years really of, 20 to 25 and really writing about that. And then this one, it's close. I'm writing in first person and in present time. So it's very close up, but yeah, it's definitely healing. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that like it got very popular in 2020. So it means that some people are taking our advice to take care of themselves, or at least like everybody's advice to take care of themselves. So
Out of curiosity, what did you study in college? Because the way you talk, you're just so passionate and I love listening to you. So what did you study?
Oh my gosh, my heart is smiling. Thank you so much.
Oh,
So I was a rec major and recreation administration. So my option was in special events and tourism.
okay.
And so when I graduated, part of the requirement was to do an internship. So something hands-on in the world. And I was so involved during college in the sorority and summer orientation and just clubs and different things that I wasn't able to study abroad. So I thought, I'm going to study abroad or like do my internship abroad. And so I moved to New Zealand for 2 years.
Wow.
Um, and lived there and had a wonderful experience. And I write a lot about that in Your 20s. But so when I was there, I worked in events. I thought, ooh, I'm going to be, an event, a wedding planner and all of that. But after working a bunch of odd jobs in catering and weddings and the stress behind the scenes, if there's any wedding people out there, props to you, because the patience you've got to have is like through the roof. I was like, I'm not sure about this. Like the people aspect, don't enjoy the stress and like the hypervigilance of some of the people. And so I shifted, being in New Zealand, it being, tourism capital of the world, right? Then I shifted into tourism there and worked for a whale and dolphin safari company called Explore NZ, which was wonderful and very, very cool. It feels like a different life now, but something about like being so far away from my family really allowed me to try on a lot of what we spoke about in the podcast around what do I need? What feels good? And like finding friendship in a foreign country. Yes, they speak English, but still a different country. That's a whole other thing, right? So it was a big learning opportunity for me there.
Yeah, I'm sure. So building off of that, do you have any like one piece of advice that you could give a 20 something? I'm sure that's hard to pinpoint and you might talk about that in your book, but if there's one thing that you would tell a 20 something like myself to go and do, what would it be?
I think that so throughout the entire book, there's this through line of connecting with self, and I call it your ness. So you add ness to the back of your name, and you have your own unique name for your inner voice of wisdom. So my Jessness, right? When I'm aligned with my Jessness, she'll tell me to rest a hell of a lot more. She'll tell me to say no to that thing that you have anxiety about. She'll tell me to actually get away from your desk and eat lunch outside. When I'm not connected with my Jessness, I may be looking to just finish all my tasks and never take a break, or say yes to everybody, or waller in self-critical thoughts. And so it's about cultivating, what does that inner voice of wisdom say to you? And I often, if it's something new to you that you haven't kind of cultivated in the past, the best way that I like to describe is like, think about how you learn. What's the, like, are you an audible learner? Are you a tangible? And like for me, I'm very audible. So like I'll get little clues of what my Jessness says for me to do through like songs, like, or like a song will, I'll be like, oh, or something will really stick out on a show I'm watching. And I just like, and it's about slowing down enough to, and I'm not saying like go to the Himalayas and, sit on a rock and, wait for a message, but like cultivate a conversation with yourself as you're out doing things, and see if that is aligning with what you're doing and the decisions you're making. And if not, no worries, don't beat yourself up, just come back to self. And if you're more of a doer, maybe it's just journaling 1 page a day, and it doesn't matter what the heck it is, you just write out and just see if there's anything there. If you're more of some people too, like if they have a trusted friend, they'll just vent to that friend and just listen to what the words that are coming out. Like like for me, sometimes, like when I was like out there dating, I'd be like thinking in my head, like, oh, like almost I'd go on a date with somebody and I'll think, oh, he's nice. And I'll think of all the different things of like what I liked about him, or trying to fit this square peg in a round hole. I'm like, oh yeah, like that was really fun. And then I'll like have a trusted friend say like, how was your date? And then what I'm saying is completely different than what I was thinking. So I'm like, oh, so anytime you can find activities that help bring you to what that voice is. And honestly, I think it starts out as a little whisper. It's not all like our self-critical voice will be louder always at first, until we practice what that inner voice of wisdom, that loving voice says. So, like your Morganness will look different from your Addisonness. And so it's about that unique relationship we have with self. And that's not always encouraged in the world. It's like, read this book, do that, try on their, idea or this. And I think that's another reason why Your 20s is popular, because it's not just like, here's what I did. It's like, here's what I did, but like, try it on. Like, maybe it's different for you. Here's an activity. So that would be my answer for that.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to give you some space. Where can the people find you?
So these days I'm honestly deep in writing. Your 20s does have its own Instagram, which is fun. So you can find on Instagram for that. I also have my own personal, which I always love hearing from readers, and those are my favorite messages. And I always know it's a reader that is requesting to follow me, because in their bio it'll say like their school and like their grad date. So I'm like, oh, it's probably 20 something. So that's just hello Jessness. But yeah, on my website there is some book bonuses, some career success guides. Maybe we can link that in the show notes or something. But
yeah, we'll link all of this stuff in there. You've talked a lot about like the reaction. How rewarding has it been since publishing? It was like, did you expect this reaction, or what? I mean, I know you hoped probably, but what was that like?
No, a million times. No, I did not. I did, like for me, I don't write a book thinking it's going to go anywhere. To me, that just puts way too much pressure on the creative process. And, I feel like part of my healing journey here as a human on earth is through words. And so, the accomplishment alone, and for me, being disciplined enough to carry something from start to end and have something tangible in my hands. I still remember the day I got the sample from Amazon, and it came in, just this one big brown envelope. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I was just savoring, like before I opened it, I'm like, I can't believe, and seeing my name on it, like it still brings me so much joy. But it's hard to describe, like, because I can think back to when I didn't have the book published, and then I remember writing it and that process, and then after, and then now continuing to see, people reach out about what resonated with them, or they'll post a photo of them. This book has been all over the world. Like I get there was someone in Italy the other day taking a photo with the book. There are people that in India, there are people in Europe. So, all over the world. And what it tells me is just there are so many people just curious about, growing up and wanting to reflect on this amazing opportunity of a decade. And there's it just goes to show you're not alone in feeling like you don't have it figured out. No one does. Like no one does. No one has it figured out. And just like the book continuing to sell every single month is just such a gift. I'm so grateful. And I always tell people too that this book has a mind and soul of its own now. She lets me know when she wants to get posted or do this or that, but I'm just here to like shepherd this almost like this being, this book that becomes, a catalyst for 20 somethings to connect and feel less alone. Because a big part too in my inspiration in writing it was I was, sitting at my house by myself, just thinking like, God, I have no idea like who I am, what I want to do. And so I memorized this way of, okay, this is my PR speech, like this is what I'm doing next and blah, blah, blah. And like on the outside, it also looked like I knew exactly what I was doing, but inside it was, there was a conflict inside. I did not feel that way. And so like, then you look on social media and I'm like, God, everybody knows what they're doing, photos of where they're going next or an internship or, they already have a job. How do they already have a job? This person's married. Oh my God. Like there's all this stuff. And I just felt more and more alone. So being able to just throw out there and like, look, like there is no one way, there's no order, there's no nothing. It gives people just the invitation to think about that differently and gives them some more space to carve out their own journey. So that alone is just to be able to help people with that through something that I wrote is just, I feel so grateful.
That's amazing. I mean, congratulations. It's so good to hear. I really do think, in speaking with you and getting to like know you through this, I think your authenticity really shines through. And like, I listened to a sample of the book and I think I might be adding that to my Amazon cart. And I was it you that was doing the voice, like the audible voice?
Yes. Uh-huh.
I was listening and I was like, wow, this I had the thought of like, this sounds really good. And I thought it was sounded really authentic. So like double kudos. And I'm just putting that together now that as we're talking. So she sounds familiar. But I
Thank
think
you.
that that's gone a long way. And that's really obviously connected to so many people. It's always fun to hear like, oh, in like other countries, they get it too. Like, we're not just in our little American bubble.
Yeah.
We know other people struggle in their 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, the
Of course.
recording was was so fun. I had to pinch myself because I was like, I went into a recording studio, had the earmuffs, the whole thing, and I just thought, and a lot of people say, oh, when I listen to the book, it sounds like I'm just talking to a friend, and the book does read. It's very conversational, so it's fun. It's a fun one.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for being on the podcast with us today. We loved having you. If you want to find Jessica, all of the links to her book, to her Instagram, to her website will be in our description. Just thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
It was very fun. All right, we'll see you next time.